It was past midnight when the rain began to fall, heavy, cold, and relentless. The hospital corridors echoed with the sound of distant footsteps and humming machines. I remember the flicker of fluorescent lights above me, the smell of disinfectant, the quiet hum of the air vents. That night was my first overnight shift as a resident doctor at St. Mary's Medical Center. I was 26, nervous, and desperate to prove I belonged there. I had no idea that before sunrise, I would face a case that would change how I saw life and death. It started with the sound of the trauma pager. Code blue, incoming. The words cut through the stillness like glass. Within minutes, paramedics burst through the emergency doors, pushing a gurney soaked in rainwater. On it lay a woman, mid-40s, motionless, skin pale and waxy. Female, 42, cardiac arrest at home, one of them shouted. We got her pulse back twice en route. Lost it again 10 minutes ago. Her name was Emily Parker. I still remember her face. Peaceful, almost serene, like someone caught between dreaming and waking. The monitors screamed as we worked. Compressions, epinephrine, defibrillation. Her chest lifted rhythmically under the hands of the attending physician, Dr. Patel, while I held the ambu bag, pumping air into lungs that refused to respond. Time since arrest? Dr. Patel asked. 40 minutes, a nurse replied. That number hit like a stone. Every minute without a heartbeat meant brain cells dying, slipping away one by one. But then her pupils reacted to light. A spark of hope. Keep going, Dr. Patel ordered. We continued. Sweat mixed with the sterile chill of the room. My arms ached. My heart raced faster than hers ever would again. And yet, something about her didn't feel gone. I can't explain it. It was like the air in the room shifted. Heavier, charged. When we paused for the next rhythm check, the monitor stayed flat. No pulse, no electrical activity. Silence, except for the rain tapping against the window. Time of death. Dr. Patel began, his voice weary. But before he could finish, a sound cut through the silence. A gasp. Everyone froze. Emily's chest rose sharply, her eyes snapping open, wide, glassy, unseeing. The heart monitor still read flatline. My hands trembled around the bag valve mask. I looked at the monitor, then back at her. She exhaled, long and deep, a shuddering breath that sent goosebumps crawling up my arms. She's breathing, I whispered. Dr. Patel stared, motionless. Check the leads, he said, voice tight. But the leads were fine. The monitor was working. The rhythm strip stayed a systole, a straight, lifeless line, while Emily's chest continued to rise and fall, slow and deliberate. We exchanged looks. No one spoke. It felt like time had stopped. After a moment, her breathing faded. Her eyelids fluttered closed again. The room fell silent once more. Dr. Patel finally said quietly, "Call it." I stepped back, my heart pounding so hard it felt like the only sound left in the room. I looked at her face, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw the corners of her lips move. Not twitch, not reflex, move. As if she wanted to say something, we covered her with a sheet. The clock read 12:47 a.m. That night was supposed to be routine. My first night on call. But as I walked out of that room, I couldn't shake one question, one that would haunt me for years to come. How could a woman take a breath when her heart wasn't beating? And somewhere deep down I knew this was only the beginning. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the hospital halls still felt heavy. The kind of silence that follows something you don't understand. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily Parker. Her pale face, her eyes snapping open, that impossible breath that seemed to defy everything I'd been taught. When I came back to the ICU, her room had changed. The lights were dimmer, the machines calmer. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, tracing the faint rhythm of a body being kept alive by science alone. She looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. Her husband, Michael Parker, stood by the bedside. He was in his early 40s, eyes bloodshot, wedding ring worn down from years of use. He turned as I entered, voice breaking. "She's a fighter," he said softly. "Emily doesn't give up easy." He told me about her. A high school English teacher, mother of two, a woman who baked every Sunday and loved teaching Shakespeare to kids who didn't care for poetry. She'd never had any serious health problems. Just stress, occasional headaches, and lately, strange dreams. When she said she kept waking up at night, he told me. She said she'd hear voices calling her name. Her medical charts were clean. Heart normal. Blood work fine. No family history of cardiac disease. There was no reason she should have collapsed. And yet, there she was, kept alive by machines, her EEG showing little to no brain activity. But what unsettled me most were the things I couldn't write down. The tiny movements the nurses noticed, her fingers twitching when Michael spoke, her lips quivering as if whispering words we couldn't hear. Dr. Patel called them spinal reflexes, automatic responses of a dying nervous system. But every time I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still inside, trapped, aware. That morning, as the first light filtered through the blinds, I sat in the ICU break room, staring into my untouched coffee. They tell you in medical school to stay clinical, to focus on the diagnosis, not the person. But that's easier said than done when the patient's husband keeps bringing you stories about the woman she was. When you see photos taped beside her bed, Emily smiling, holding her children, alive in every sense that word can mean, I remember watching Michael lean down, whispering something into her ear. A tear rolled down her cheek. The monitors didn't change. Her brain activity didn't spike. But I saw it. So did the nurse, standing next to me. We both said nothing. Because how do you explain a tear from someone whose brain should no longer register emotion, thought, or even pain? That was the moment I stopped thinking of Emily as a case, and started seeing her as a mystery. And deep down, I knew this mystery was only deepening. The days that followed felt strange, like the hospital itself was holding its breath. Every shift, I'd walk past Emily Parker's room expecting nothing to change, and yet something always did. A flicker on a monitor, a whisper from a nurse, a quiet story told in the break room about something no one could quite explain. On paper, Emily's condition was unchanged, stable but unresponsive. Machines breathed for her, fed her, kept her temperature regulated. But the nurses began noticing things. The first was the heart monitor. It would blip once, a faint electrical flutter, even though her heart had no rhythm of its own. At first, we blamed faulty leads. Then it happened again, this time while no one was near her. Another night, the intercom system in the ICU crackled to life. A faint voice whispered through the static. A woman's voice, soft, almost pleading. It repeated the same word. Emily. The nurse on duty froze. She swore it wasn't feedback. Security checked the system. Nothing wrong. No interference. No technical malfunction. I tried to explain it away. Fatigue, coincidence, a mixture of fear and suggestion. The mind sees patterns when it's desperate for meaning. But then came the night that shattered my confidence completely. It was nearly 2 a.m. I was checking vitals alone in her room, charting the same lifeless numbers, oxygen saturation 93%, pulse 0, EEG flatline, everything mechanical, everything predictable. Until, suddenly, her oxygen levels began to climb. 95, 98, 100. The ventilator, which measures every breath delivered, showed no change, no additional airflow, no adjustment in settings. Yet the monitor insisted she was breathing deeper, stronger, as if something inside her had started drawing in life on its own. I leaned closer, hand trembling as I checked her chest movement. It was subtle but real. Her ribs expanded, slow and deliberate. A whisper of air escaped her lips. My first thought was equipment error. I switched out the pulse oximeter, recalibrated the ventilator. Everything read correctly, but her oxygen levels stayed high. The machines were telling me she was breathing, while the ventilator told me she wasn't. I remember backing away from the bed, the hairs on my arms standing up. The room felt colder, heavier. For a brief moment I swore I heard a sound. Not the beeping or the mechanical hum, but something softer. A murmur, a voice. It wasn't distinct enough to understand, but I felt it. Not heard. Felt. Like a whisper brushing against thought. The next morning I told Dr. Patel. He listened, expression unreadable. Then he sighed. "You're exhausted, Alex," he said. "You've been on nights for a week. What you saw, what you think you saw, could be sensor lag or static." "Doctor," I said quietly. "She was breathing." He paused. "Sometimes," he replied. "Our brains want to find meaning in chaos. It's how we cope." Maybe he was right. Maybe it was my imagination, a desperate attempt to reconcile what I couldn't understand. But as I left the ICU, I glanced back through the small window in her door. Her eyes were open, just for a second. Wide, staring straight ahead, at me. I froze. Every rational thought collapsing under a single, unshakable certainty. Emily Parker was still there. Not alive in the way medicine defines it, not dead in the way we fear it, but somewhere in between. That night, I began reading about rare phenomena in medicine. Spontaneous return of circulation after cardiac death, the so-called Lazarus phenomenon. Most cases lasted seconds, maybe minutes. None had lasted days. And yet, as the rain returned and thunder echoed outside, I knew what the textbooks didn't. Emily Parker's story didn't fit science. It was rewriting it. By the end of that week, I was running on caffeine and disbelief. The ICU was quiet, but it felt alive in ways I couldn't explain, as if something invisible moved just beneath the sterile surface. Every night, I checked Emily's vitals. Every night, I found myself waiting for something to happen. The nurses had stopped joking about her. At first, they'd called her the Lazarus case. But after the whispers, after the strange readings, the laughter faded. Now they spoke in hushed tones around her room, crossing themselves as they passed the door. And one nurse, Lisa, told me she'd heard Emily whisper a name in the dark. "Michael," she said, clear as day. I swear she said her husband's name. I wanted to dismiss it, to believe it was exhaustion playing tricks on everyone. But that same night, when Michael came in to visit, something happened I still can't explain. He sat beside her bed, holding her hand, talking softly about their kids, about the life they'd built together. Her eyes stayed closed, her breathing mechanical, her EEG flat. But then a single tear rolled down her cheek. Michael looked up at me, eyes wide. "Did you see that?" he whispered. I nodded slowly, unable to speak. There was no logical explanation. Reflexes could make muscles twitch, sure. But tears? Tears are different. They require emotion, a neural response that shouldn't exist without brain activity. Yet here it was. Proof that something inside her still recognized love, still responded to it. I started spending more time in that room. I'd sit quietly, just watching, sometimes talking to her even though I knew she couldn't answer. "Emily," I'd say softly, "if you can hear me, we're still here." Sometimes the monitors would flicker slightly, like they were listening too. One evening I met with Dr. Harris, a neuropsychologist who sometimes consulted for our department. I told him everything, the whispers, the breathing, the tears. He listened carefully, then leaned back. "What you're describing," he said, "might be a form of terminal lucidity." I frowned. "Terminal lucidity?" "It's rare," he explained. "Moments of awareness or emotion just before death, even in patients with no detectable brain function. We don't know why it happens. Some say it's the brain's last surge of electrical coherence, like a dying star flaring one final time." "But she's not dying," I said quietly. "She's lingering." He gave a sympathetic smile. "Maybe that's what makes this different." That night, I sat by Emily's bed again. The machines hummed softly, a mechanical lullaby. I watched the slow rhythm of her chest rise and fall, not knowing if it was her or the ventilator keeping that rhythm alive. And as I sat there, I realized I was no longer just a doctor. I was a witness to something science couldn't name, to a woman hovering in that fragile border between here and somewhere else. I whispered, "Emily, where are you right now?" No answer, only the faint hiss of oxygen, the beep of distant monitors. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to answer, that she was caught in that impossible space between life and death, and somehow she knew I was there with her. It was a Thursday evening, my 7th consecutive night on call. The air in the ICU felt different that day, thick with tension, the kind of tension that settles in your chest without you realizing it. Emily's vitals had been steady for days, her condition unchanged. There was no medical reason to think anything would happen that night. And yet, every instinct in me said otherwise. I remember standing by her bed, checking the monitors like I'd done 100 times before. Michael was there too, his head resting in his hands, the faint hum of the ventilator filling the silence. It was just past 9 p.m. when the alarms began to scream, "Code blue! Room 214. Emily's heart rate, once steady, plummeted to 0. Her oxygen saturation nosedived. Within seconds, the room filled with people, nurses, respiratory therapists, Dr. Patel leading the charge. I took my place at the foot of the bed, hands pressing down on her sternum, counting compressions under my breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Time fractured. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears, the rhythm of the defibrillator charging. "Clear," Dr. Patel shouted. The jolt lifted Emily's body off the bed. The monitor fluttered, then went flat again. Push 1 milligram epinephrine. Minutes bled into each other. The air was electric, desperate. Sweat ran down my face as we worked in synchronized chaos. Compressions, shocks, medication, again and again. But Emily wasn't coming back. Dr. Patel finally exhaled, his voice low. "We've done all we can." I froze. That phrase, it always hit like a hammer. It meant giving up, closing the chapter, saying goodbye to someone who never got to say it back. I stared at the lifeless woman before me, refusing to accept it. And then, everything changed. A sound. A soft, trembling sound that didn't belong in a room full of machines. A voice. "Please, don't let me go yet." The words were clear. Quiet, but unmistakable. Every head in the room turned. For a moment, no one moved. The heart monitor was still flat. There was no pulse. Yet her lips had moved. I saw it. Dr. Patel's voice cracked as he whispered, "Did she just—" Before he could finish, Emily's chest rose again, slow and deliberate. The ventilator hadn't triggered. It was her. Her body, breathing on its own. A nurse screamed. Another began to cry. And then, as if the world itself had exhaled, the monitor chirped to life. A heartbeat. Weak, erratic, but there. I felt my knees give slightly. I'd seen people come back before, but never like this. Never after this long, never after she'd spoken. We all stood frozen, caught between awe and disbelief. Dr. Patel snapped back to command. "Get a rhythm strip. Prepare for stabilization." His voice was firm again, but I saw his hands trembling. Over the next few minutes, Emily stabilized. Her pulse returned, her color improved, her breathing synced with the ventilator once more. But she wasn't the same. Her eyes flickered beneath her lids, her mouth moving slightly, as if caught in conversation with something we couldn't hear. She remained like that for hours, hovering in consciousness. When she finally opened her eyes, her voice was fragile, but clear. "I saw light," she whispered to Michael, who clutched her hand, sobbing. "They told me it wasn't time. They told me to come back." I stood by the doorway, frozen. My medical mind wanted to write it off as hallucination, oxygen deprivation, brain misfiring, but something about her tone, calm, assured, made that impossible. 17 hours later, Emily passed peacefully in her sleep. No alarms, no chaos this time. Just stillness. Her final heartbeat was gentle, almost like a sigh, and as I watched the line on the monitor fade into stillness, I knew I would never see death or life the same way again. The ICU was silent the next morning. The chaos of the night before had vanished, leaving behind only the hum of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic. Emily's bed was empty now, the sheets folded neatly, her nameplate already removed. Yet, somehow, the room still felt occupied, like her presence hadn't entirely left. I found myself standing there long after my shift had ended, staring at the space where she'd taken her final breath. I kept thinking about her voice. "Please, don't let me go yet." The clarity of those words haunted me. They hadn't been imagined. Everyone in that room had heard them, and still, no one could explain how she spoke when her heart wasn't beating. Dr. Patel joined me at the doorway. His usual confidence seemed dulled. He looked at me for a long moment before saying quietly, "Sometimes we see things we can't understand. You'll learn to let them go." But I couldn't. I pulled her chart from the records room that afternoon, searching for anything I might have missed. I reviewed her labs, her imaging, her vitals, every line of data. Nothing stood out. Nothing that could explain what had happened. It wasn't there, at least not in ink or numbers. Later that week, I met with Michael in the hospital garden. He looked older than he had days earlier, his grief etched deep. When I offered my condolences, he gave a faint, almost peaceful smile. "She told me something before she passed," he said. "She said she saw you? Me?" I asked, startled. He nodded. "She said she saw you standing in light. Said she felt safe because of you. That she wasn't afraid anymore." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to tell him it must have been a dream, a trick of the dying brain, but the words wouldn't come. The conviction in his eyes stopped me. That night I sat alone in the residence lounge, staring at the city lights beyond the rain-slicked window. I replayed every moment, every anomaly, the whisper on the intercom, the flickering monitors, the breath without a heartbeat. I realized I was no longer just a doctor looking for an answer. I was a witness to something I wasn't equipped to define. When I asked colleagues about it, theories flooded in. "Electrical artifact," one said. "Residual brainstem activity," another offered. Everyone had a theory. None of them fit. All I knew, all I still know, is that for 17 hours, Emily Parker lived in a space no textbook could describe. A space between measurable life and something else, and in that moment, when she looked at her husband and smiled for the last time, I felt something in the room shift, as if the line between life and death wasn't a wall at all, but a door she had stepped through, just long enough to tell us she was still there. It's been years since that night, but I can still hear the sound of Emily Parker's voice in my mind, clear, steady, human. I've treated hundreds of patients since then, seen trauma, miracles, tragedies, but nothing has ever stayed with me the way she did. That case didn't just challenge my understanding of medicine, it changed the way I see life itself. I became a doctor because I believed science could explain everything. I believed every symptom had a cause, every death a reason. But Emily's case, her impossible breath, her words, her return, showed me there are moments medicine can't quantify. Moments that exist beyond data and diagnosis. Over the years, I've spoken about her to colleagues, sometimes hesitantly, testing their reactions. Some dismissed it as a freak coincidence, a body's final misfiring nerves, a dying brain's echo. Others listened quietly, as if they, too, had seen something they couldn't explain. Because the truth is, every doctor, every nurse, eventually encounters a moment that defies logic, something they can't chart or calculate. Most never talk about it, but they remember. Sometimes, late at night, I walk past that same ICU corridor. The same flickering lights, the same rhythmic beeping of monitors. The room where Emily once lay has long since been reassigned, but whenever I glance through the doorway, I swear I can still feel it. That same quiet hum, that same unseen presence. I think of her husband, Michael, and what he told me. How she said she saw me standing in light, how she wasn't afraid anymore. For a long time, I wondered if it was meant for comfort, or if somehow she truly had seen something beyond us. I don't have that answer. Maybe I never will, but I've come to understand something else. Medicine can restart a heart, but it can't always explain what makes that heart want to beat again. There's something deeper. Call it consciousness, spirit, the human will, that science hasn't yet touched. When people ask why I still think about Emily Parker, I tell them this. She reminded me that life isn't just a heartbeat on a screen. It's a connection between people, between moments, between worlds we don't fully understand. Medicine taught me how to keep a heart beating, but Emily taught me that being alive is something far greater. Some patients never truly leave us. They linger, in memory, in mystery, in that quiet space between breaths, reminding us that not every miracle can be measured, and that's why, even now, she still haunts me. Not as a ghost, but as a question I'll never stop asking.